Hey everyone, welcome to today's live stream. My name is Victor Struve, and I am glad to welcome you to our live stream, US Biolabs and Secret Military Program, an interview with investigative journalist Dilyana Gaytandzhieva. And before we move to the interview with Dilyana, and before we welcome her to our program, just want to have a little brief information on the situation with our project. In late November, Southfront faced in a crisis with about a half of the minimum budget collected less than a week ahead of the end of the month. However, thanks to your support and the help from our friends who are promoting our donation appeal, Southfront was able to collect $5,200, so we are able to keep a fully fledged video production. Our monthly video with numbers of the produced content last month will be released by the end of the week. And just a few technical details when it comes to how this live stream is going to work. First, you will be able to, just as last times, you'll be able to donate on southfront.org/questions, which you can see both on the screen and in the description. And also, we have now enabled YouTube Super Chat, so you can support Southfront from YouTube right now. If there are many questions, stream participants will be able to answer the questions from the donations, and at the end have some interesting questions from the chat. So, without further ado, just want to welcome the Bulgarian journalist, which I am very proud of because I myself am Bulgarian, Dilyana Gaytandzhieva, and just to tell you that our colleague Brian Kalman is with us again. So welcome, Dilyana. How are you doing tonight?
Hello, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you for taking interest in this story. It's my honor to be your guest tonight.
Hey Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Victor. It's an honor to have Dilyana back on the live stream. And I think she's doing some great work. And, you know, I'd just like to thank her for her bravery and actually engaging in real investigative journalism, which is really hard to find these days, especially in the Western world. I don't think there are any really investigative journalists doing any important work like Dilyana is. So I'd like to thank her for her work and thank her for joining us again.
Thank you. I'm Eastern European journalist. I don't know if this is luck or not, but this is how it is. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some new updates on the story. But Victor can give more information on this investigation, and later on I can update you on the follow-up story.
Yeah, of course, Dilyana. And right now I'm showing your website, dilyana.bg, which all of you can just log into and visit and see everything from your investigations. And obviously the most recent one that caught the attention of the world, some of the world media, some of the world governments, was about the diplomatic viruses. And can you tell us a little bit more about the investigation itself, just briefly in 2 to 3 sentences to tell us what it's all about, and then what were the issues that you faced during the investigation?
In short, what I found out was that the U.S. Embassy to Tbilisi transports frozen human blood and pathogens as diplomatic cargo for a secret U.S. military program. Internal documents implicating U.S. diplomats in the transportation of and experimenting on pathogens under diplomatic cover were leaked to me by Georgian insiders. This is how I started investigating the Pentagon biolaboratories, not only in Georgia, but also in Ukraine, in other former Soviet Union countries, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, to name a few. I published some of these leaked documents. I went to Tbilisi twice. And you asked me about the challenges that I faced. This investigation was very hard for me. I was alone. The second time when I went to Georgia, I was alone. I didn't have a cameraman with me. I filmed myself. And the first day when I arrived at Tbilisi, it was early in the morning. I was very tired. I hadn't slept the whole night traveling from Bulgaria. And I went to sleep. When I woke up, this was, I rented a flat and I locked all the doors, closed all the windows, everything. So I was alone in this flat. But when I woke up, I was locked in the bedroom of my rented flat. And luckily, I had my phone with me. No, my laptop, everything, my camera, everything was in another room, in the living room, but I had my phone with me, so I was able to call the emergency services, and they came from the rooftop, and they saved me. The police also came, and they told me that they had no idea who had broken into the flat and why I was locked, and they just didn't have any clue. And I was a bit upset because obviously this was some kind of probably warning that I need to be very careful. Nothing was missing. I checked my laptop. It was fine, but I'm not sure if anybody copied anything from my laptop. Anyway, I don't have what to hide, and I published anything that was leaked to me. And what was leaked to me proved that the U.S. Embassy was involved in in a large-scale military operation in Georgia. What is very worrying, and I can, and Victor also can agree on that. We come from small countries, and coming from these small countries, we are like hostages. I mean, Bulgaria, Georgia, even Ukraine, we are like hostages in the still, I can call it Cold War between the United States and Russia. Luckily, it is still not a real war, but what's happening now in Georgia and in Ukraine is very worrying because, for example, after I published this investigation, there was briefing by the Russian Ministry of Defense because they got, I think, the same leaked documents by Igor Grigoradze. This is a former security chief, Georgian security chief. So he leaked the documents to the Russian Ministry of Defense, and they gave a press conference. After that, my source told me that the laboratory was shut down, probably temporarily, and now all that secret experiments have stopped for the time being. All US military scientists with their diplomatic immunity and diplomatic cover were transferred to another American military air base in Tbilisi called Vasyani Military Air Base. So now they are working inside this military air base. And also very worrying information coming from Georgia that a new aerodrome for a US strategic aircraft have been built in Tbilisi, and in response, Moscow has deployed 20 fighter jets and S-400s, part of their air defense systems in Dagestan. Dagestan is a republic of the Russian Federation bordering on Georgia. So now we have, and now what we are witnessing is a military build-up of military aircraft on Russia-Georgia border. So I can say that the story about the biolaboratory of the United States in Georgia now turns to be something bigger, part of huger and more worrying situation that could escalate very, very soon.
Dilyana, can I ask you a question? The U.S. government and the Georgian government, I guess, did they pass off this facility, this laboratory, as part of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency's program? I think they call it the Cooperative Biological Engagement Program, and that goes back to the reasoning behind this program, at least on the surface, is that the U.S. was going to move into post-Soviet countries and regions that were under the kind of in the Russian sphere of influence, or the Soviet sphere of influence, I should say, like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and also the Ukraine, to try and help those countries to dismantle former Soviet biological weapons programs. Was that what they were saying that this facility was operating under? That initiative?
Yes, this is the official explanation, but this is just the pretext, because if the United States was there, I mean, in Georgia, in Ukraine, in Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and the Middle East, and many other 25 countries across the world, only to assist them so that they can dismantle their military biological weapons facilities, why would they still work in these military biolaboratories? And furthermore, the United States has spent at least $2.1 billion on such military biolaboratories across the world. Instead of spending so much money and US taxpayer money on the health of its own citizens, it doesn't make sense. Also, I want to stress that what I witnessed myself, what I recorded, the witnesses' account of the locals in Georgia, they have nothing to do with this explanation. People were very worried because they had symptoms which occur during chemical poisoning. Also, there were, at least according to my documents that I have, at least 100 death cases in Georgia related to officially hepatitis C program. But according to the Russian Ministry of Defense and according to their experts, this program is just a cover-up for experiments on non-biological weapons. What I can also say is that no matter the official explanation of the Georgian government is also complicit in the death of at least 100 people, because the private American company which was involved in the hepatitis C program signed an agreement that it cannot be held accountable for any death, for any damage, for anything that can result from the program, and everything is for free. Can you imagine that a private American company would spend millions of dollars on a foreign country like Georgia just for the sake of humanity, and the result is at least 100 death cases? Nobody can say for sure what the reason for this or the cause of this 100 deaths was, because there was no post-mortem examination according to my documents. Some of the causes of death are listed as unknown, and I also can agree that further investigation must be carried out, because it's very worrying. 100 death cases in the span of just 1 month, it's too much, and no official explanation has been given apart from Russian propaganda. This is what the
Dilyana,
Georgians
I
are
just
saying,
wanted
but given the fact that Georgia and Russia have their internal issues, and they have been in a state of war for such a long time because of the border issues in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. I'm not surprised that the truth would never be revealed. Anybody can say this is propaganda or this is not true, but these are the facts. These are the internal documents. Some of these documents are internal memos between the Pentagon and the Georgian Ministry of Health. They are
Dilyana,
official
just wanted,
correspondence.
to
Furthermore,
cut it here. Just wanted to ask you here because what we've been receiving and what you've been receiving, because I've been following the situation with you for quite a long time, and people are like, well, this is a conspiracy theory, well, this is a Russian propaganda, well, all of this, blah, blah, and nobody has actually gone through the documents. Very few people have gone through all of this. And what I wanted to ask you so that we can clarify to everyone, because we are a place for freedom of speech, where we want to show facts and we want to show people's opinions. And what I wanted to ask you right now is what evidence and what did you actually collect when you went to Georgia? What was the information you collected? And overall, what was the evidence?
I got the question. All evidence that I collected, I published on my website, and these are internal memos, emails originating from the Georgian Ministry of Health.
We're showing it right now.
According to these emails and documents, here we are talking about a military program, because if the people who ask and want to know more, they can read these leaked emails and they can see who the sender of these documents was. It was Pentagon contractor working in Georgia inside this military laboratory. Everything is described in these documents, and I know that many people think this is not possible. To be honest, when I heard this was in 2017, when I heard for the first time about the existence of such military biolaboratories, I was like, no, this is not possible. This is science fiction. I myself didn't believe, because I'm from a generation who doesn't have much knowledge of biological weapons. For me, it wasn't possible to, I even couldn't imagine that somebody can harm another human being that way. So I started educating myself on the issue, and I went to Georgia. I met sources on the ground, insiders. I'm very thankful to them, because they risked a lot providing this information. And I think that the same documents that were leaked to me were leaked to the Georgian, former Georgian Minister of Security Chief, Igor Grigoradze. I'm not sure, but I think the information is the same. And the Georgian Minister of Health, his name is David Sergienko. He was asked by local journalists how I got his emails and this information. He said probably his email and the Ministry of Health was subjected to a cyber attack, but he confirmed the authenticity of these documents and these emails, meaning that everything that I published, it is true, and the minister confirmed that it was genuine.
Well, I mean, I, for one, Dilyana, have absolutely no difficulty in understanding your reporting here. I mean, I read your entire report at length, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, it shouldn't really surprise anyone that the United States would be engaged in such activity and trying to keep it a secret. If you look at the U.S.'s duplicity in how it approaches treaties and conventions on weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, and nuclear, as far as non-proliferation treaties. I mean, if you look at the Chemical Weapons Convention, of all the countries that had the requirement to get rid of their, I think they're called Schedule 1 chemical weapons, which is like VX and you know, nerve agents and anthrax and the really bad stuff. The United States is the only country that hasn't complied, and it won't comply until now they're saying 2023. So if you look at the U.S. involvement with biological weapons, I mean, I live in Maryland, and in Maryland, I'm surrounded by, I think it's 30 or 31 different bioweapons or biological research facilities tied to the U.S. government in this area. And what was it, 3 years ago in 2015 when the Department of Defense was found to be shipping live anthrax? And it turns out they were using a commercial parcel carrier like FedEx or DHL to move live anthrax around the country, and also to foreign countries. I think Canada, Australia, and Korea had received live anthrax shipments that, you know, the Department of Defense was like, oh yeah, we made a mistake. We'll make sure we don't do it again. But and you know, if you look at the map too of all the Pentagon's biolaboratories, like Dilyana said, in 25 different countries. I mean, Africa, Southeast Asia, all around Russia. You know, what exactly are they engaged in at this point? It's 2018. You know, one thing that I found really striking about your reporting, Dilyana, was the drones that were under research for releasing a biological vector. I'm guessing a fly or a mosquito for some bioagent. I mean, if that's true, then that's a direct violation of
Yes.
the bioweapons treaty. I mean, the BWC, it bans biological agents and toxins, obviously, but also weapons, equipment, and delivery vehicles.
Yes, I was also shocked in the way. I remember the minute when I read drone for dispersing of toxic mosquitoes. I was like, no, this is too much. I can't believe it. But I contacted the patent lawyer who filed this application to the U.S. Patent Office. I contacted him, he replied, and he confirmed that this was a genuine invention, that he filed this patent, but he didn't want to help me interview the inventor, because it turned out that such a person with such a name doesn't exist in the U.S. Citizens Registry. It is a pseudonym. It does. This man doesn't exist. And I asked, what's the purpose of this? Why is he? Why can't I contact this person, inventor? And I got a reply from the lawyer that his client, whoever his client was, didn't want to talk about this invention. It was very secret story, and the address was also fake. So the name of the inventor, the address, everything was fake. So it is highly likely that this is again a military invention, which according to the documents is for special operations by the U.S. Special Forces.
Well, they're obviously taking means to cover up the origins of, you know, the device and who created it and for what reason, obviously, from your investigation. You know, it's interesting. I lived in the Caribbean before I moved back to the U.S., and I was in Puerto Rico for about 8 years. And, you know, we had a series of different mosquito-borne illnesses down there for a while that were supposedly, the origin was Africa, and we had the chikungunya virus, and that was followed shortly by the Zika virus, and they were talking about Centers for Disease Control, I think it was, releasing bioengineered mosquitoes that were going to somehow render the disease vector mosquito infertile. So, you know, the government got involved in that, and people were, you know, you call it a conspiracy theory, but people have concerns that what's the government doing bioengineering life forms and disease vectors, and so I can understand that
they can call it conspiracy theory, but it's not a conspiracy theory that the Pentagon is investing $65 million in gene editing, and this program, which is called Insect Allies. This program includes how to explain it in simple terms, GM insects, genetically modified insects, are being tested to transfer genetically modified viruses in plants. This is the program. But can you imagine what's the purpose of this? I can't get it. Why would they create genetically modified insects and genetically modified viruses? They infect the insect with genetically modified viruses and release these insects to infect plants. And probably they would say this is for pest control. How can we eat, even if this is for pest control, how can we eat these plants? Can you imagine that, for example, if you eat a tomato or whatever, it would be infected with a genetically modified virus. I don't understand what's the idea of this, but this is a military program, and it is official program, because according to the U.S. Federal Contracts Registry, the Pentagon or an agency from the Pentagon paid $65 billion on private contractors to create this, it is still in progress. It has not finished, but we don't know the results, and I don't think this is very legal. I don't know exactly the legislation in the United States, but in Europe this is not legal. I don't know why in the United States such experiments are possible.
Well, I was just reading the other day, I think actually it was last week, but the U.S. Navy is developing a life form, a bioengineered life form using nanotechnology. Somehow they're going to release these millions of these life forms into the ocean so that they can detect submarines. I mean, that sounds crazy to me. I mean, what are the ramifications of that, But yeah, I mean, the U.S. government's involved in a lot of these programs, and a lot of people have no idea that they're doing these things.
Actually, when I was in Georgia, most of the people didn't know about even the existence of such laboratory. When I took a taxi and I said the address, the laboratory, the Luga Center, they asked me, what is this? They didn't know that such a facility, military facility, even existed. I interviewed former Secretary of the Ministry of Health, and even though she was a high-ranking official, even she didn't know about. She didn't know what the Americans were doing in this military facility, because according to the documents, only U.S. citizens with security clearance have access to special zones inside this laboratory. And when the Georgians said we are in full control of this facility, this is not true. They told this only for journalists, for the media. Actually, if you read in detail the documents, you will see it is clearly signified in the documents. Only U.S. citizens with security clearance. This is very worrying. By the way, I asked the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Health, Robert Kadlec, on a conference about biological weapons in Brussels. I put these questions to him.
Was it the one that you got, they wanted to get you out of there?
Yes, they expelled me from the parliament directly. And
I'm actually sure
he got very angry with my questions. And he said that this was for defense purposes for the U.S. military personnel in all these 25 countries.
Do you want to hear it right now? I have it from your website. It's 2 minutes. We can show it to the people.
Yeah, I watched that too. I saw what you're
Pentagon
talking
been
about.
operating military laboratories in 25 countries, bordering on the U.S. Main rivals, Russia, China, and Iran. And why has the number of deadly outbreaks in all those countries increased dramatically since the start of the military program of the United States in these countries?
I will just say unequivocally and undeniably, the U.S. does not have a military biological weapons program. Period. End of statement. Number two, we have been working, and I do know for the Department of Defense, they've been working with partners in parts of the world to ensure that those laboratories, and we train them on how to do diagnostic tests on these diseases, to ensure that they can manage them and also safely secure those pathogens so they're not accessible by terrorists or by criminals who would do ill with them.
While all these projects classified information, all these biolaboratories of the Pentagon in 25 countries across the world, why are they classified information?
They're not classified, they're openly available to anyone who wants to look at them.
No, I tried.
Okay.
No, this is not true. They're
I
classified
think-
information.
No, you had
Why?
your chance. It's not an investigation here, I'm very
Why
sorry.
are you talking about
Of course, but I will not let
terrorist
you,
threats? Why can't
I
we
will
talk
not
about,
give you the word
real-
like this. We
real
try
threats?
to answer your questions, but that's not the place. Case closed. Thank you very much.
Just one more question.
We can take questions right now.
What is the need of military biolaboratories of the United States in 25 countries across the
I
world?
can't answer that question. That's not his capacity.
This is public area. I can use the elevator. I can use the elevator.
Sorry, not this one. This one's full.
No, it is not full. Please, I can use the elevator. I can use the elevator. Come.
No more questions then.
Why not?
Okay, we're either going down.
Why is the Pentagon investing
We've gotta
$65
get going.
million in gene editing?
I'm sorry.
The gene editing is part of these programs. Can you answer why?
So we just saw your video and how they definitely didn't want to answer your questions. And Dilyana, there was a question from the audience, and actually, can you just both of you, can you look on your Skype chat?
Yes.
And open the link, because we have a question, and just want to thank New B4ZOD for his donation of $5, and he's asking, hello folks, do you think the biolab program in Georgia is also connected to this? And I am going to show the link to the people right now.
Yes, I have come across this information about this federal project involving collection of Russian synovial tissue and RNA. If this is, I'm trying to open it now. I think this is the same.
Exactly, and you have it actually on your website. But can you comment on that?
Yes, it was even it was discussed in the U.S. Media, because journalists asked the Pentagon what was the idea of this project and why the Pentagon has been specifically collecting Russian synovial tissue and RNA. The explanation was very obscure. It was something like our client provided us, or provider of synovial tissue and RNA provided only Russian samples, so we needed and we asked for more Russian samples, which sounds strange. I don't understand the idea of this, because it is stated that they don't accept Ukrainian samples. They accept only Russian samples, raising fears of possible ethnic experiments. I don't want to say ethnic biological weapons, because officially nobody has confirmed the development of such ethnical biological weapons. But I think the Pentagon needs to explain in more clear way why have they been collecting specifically Russian biological material? What for? In my previous investigation, I also found evidence that apart from the Russian collection of Russian biological material, the United States has been also collecting Chinese biological material, even cancer tissue, which was it was very weird. Why would the United States collect Chinese tumors or cancer tissues from Chinese patients? I have no answer. I really tried. I tried hard. I went to Brussels. I put my questions to the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Health. I couldn't get any logical answer. It's very worrying because all these programs, they are secret and they are not in the United States. They are in countries bordering on the U.S. main rivals, Russia, China, and Iran. And all these countries could possibly be turned into hostages in the future if there's a war between the United States and Russia. This war would not be in the United States or in Russia. This war would be on the territory of these small countries like Georgia, like Ukraine, or others. It's not fair, and I think that the governments of all these countries should expel all foreigners from their territory, and it's not a defense against Russia. On the opposite, and I can also agree with this theory that the existence of a foreign military base on your territory doesn't mean protection. On the contrary, it is a threat. We have 3 military air bases of the United States in Bulgaria.
Therefore,
they are
sorry,
here for free. They don't pay for
Dilyana,
using
sorry,
our-
they are 4. They are not 3. They are 4. You're not correct here. They are more than 3.
Okay. You can continue.
But yeah, jokes apart, it's a big issue. It's a big issue because we can even start a discussion, but probably not in this, probably not tonight, about why does NATO even exist when it doesn't really have a rival, and why do we need 4 military bases of NATO in Bulgaria when there is no direct threat to us. Anyway, of course, it's all about geopolitics and military dominance.
And money. And money.
And money, yeah. And we discussed that with Brian actually in the previous live streams, that that basically sometimes the defense ministry of the US just wants to have a threat so that they can spend more money and money and
That's
money
right.
and money.
Perpetual war. It keeps the military-industrial complex going. I mean, they don't want peace. They don't want wars they can win. They just want wars. And that's what it boils down to. I mean, NATO, if you look at how much money's wrapped up in NATO, it's part of the military-industrial complex, mostly
And they
the
want
U.S.
more, and they want more. They're like, we're not protected, we don't feel
unfortunately.
safe. And Trump is like, yes, you need to invest more, but you need to invest in our weapons. So,
Yes, and I wish, you know, what Dilyana says, you know, I wish that more countries would stand up and say, okay, we don't want any more U.S. bases on our territory, and you know, we don't want to partake in this anymore. But you know, it's there's so much coercion, and there's so many threats. There's so much corruption. You know, it's one of those problems that has been exacerbated since the end of the Cold War, and I don't see any end in sight to it. But you know, the U.S. has it's like 700 different military facilities of some sort all over the globe, and you know, it doesn't make anyone any safer. It just keeps the wheels of the military-industrial complex turning and makes certain people a lot of money, and the rest of us got to suffer for it.
I would keep silent. You said corruption, but probably it's not a good idea to say. But Victor can confirm that our government has signed such an agreement with the United States that if we want to expel this military personnel, foreign military personnel, and we don't want foreign military air bases on our territory, we can't expel them. We are not allowed because they consider this as Victor said, four military bases, their own territory. On our territory, it's such disgrace, and it's not only the fault of these big powers because they are rivals and there's an arms race or whatever. It's the fault of all these countries, this slavish way of thinking and mentality that you can't stand up and defend your own territory. We are sovereign countries. I mean, Bulgaria, Georgia.
On documents. Because, Dilyana, if you're saying that, do you remember how many people participated in the anti-NATO protests in Bulgaria? There were like 10 to 30 people that were going out.
Less than 30 people. And if you protest, they call you a Russian spy.
Of course.
Simply because if you are anti-war, or hence anti-NATO, you are pro-Russia, which is not true. You are pro-Bulgarian or pro-Georgian. You defend your country. You are not supposed to defend your country. You must support wars. You must support NATO. You must support foreign military bases on your territory. This is the logic. This is the propaganda. This is the scariest thing that's happening. I was in Syria many times, and what I witnessed, the first victim of any war, this is the truth. This is how any propagandists work. They spread this fear. If you oppose us, you are spy, you are enemy. And journalists in Bulgaria, they are afraid to speak the truth, because otherwise they will be called enemies, foreign spies, Russian propagandists, whatever.
They will be just fired, just as you were for your investigation. Yes, simply said.
I didn't want to mention that. It's very shameful. People will think that in Bulgaria we are like, but we are. Really, I'm very proud of Victor, but he's just one of the very few Bulgarians who speak up and who protest and who say the truth. It's very hard here because, like in Georgia, when I was the first time when I was there, I met many people. They gave me a lot of information, but none of them wanted to say this on camera. They were afraid. They said we will lose our job, something bad will happen. And I experienced myself. If you try to do something, you just either lose your job or your home or friends. I lost many of my friends because they consider me enemy of the state, simply because I'm against Bulgaria sending weapons that kill children in Syria. I'm against this.
Absolutely.
Which means that I'm against NATO. How can I be against this? This is little support for terrorists. How can I be against it? I don't see the sense, and I'm very I feel shame because I'm a Bulgarian and I can't do anything to stop it. Every day I check the public flight trackers like Flight Radar 24 and others, and I see airlines again and again sending weapons from Bulgaria to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia, and nobody cares in my country. They really couldn't care less. I'm sorry.
I can actually just confirm that nobody really cared about your investigation. By the way, because right now I have moved to some of the photos showing a person in probably an older Mercedes with a red sign, a diplomatic sign on his car, and you were talking to him, and he didn't want to answer your questions. What happened there? What was
Yes.
your interaction with him?
I was watching what was going on in this laboratory day in, day night, hiding on a nearby bridge. And I noticed that there were 6 diplomatic vehicles with registration plates of the US Embassy. So I waited to try to get in somehow in touch with these people and to ask them what they were doing inside this military facility. And I stopped one of these diplomatic cars, and the driver turned out to be entomologist, military entomologist, whose name is Joshua Bast, and who is the deputy director of this military research unit in charge of the laboratory. He lied to me. I had no idea why he lied to me. He said directly that he didn't work in the Luga Center. He said that he worked for the US Embassy, which turned to be a blatant lie, because according to the leaked documents, his name appears to be related to the Luga Center, and the address given is the address of the laboratory, not the address of the US Embassy. So probably he has what to hide in this diplomatic cover. Thanks to this diplomatic cover, also the US Embassy transports frozen human blood and pathogens as diplomatic cargo, again under diplomatic cover. Nobody knows what exactly they transported to Georgia because it was diplomatic cargo. I published a few of the documents, but nobody can be sure what pathogens exactly were transported. And this frozen human blood related to the hepatitis C program, what was exactly this blood for, this frozen blood for? And this is a typical scheme using diplomatic cover for legal programs or programs that are not very well regulated by the legislators. Nobody can catch you, nobody can check what you transport or what
Especially when it comes to the US and US dictating that. Because if some other small country was doing something against the US, then for sure everything was going to be uncovered. By the way, Dilyana, because we're talking about possible bio weapons and possible poisonings, and I want to get you back to a case in which, in my opinion, is absolutely laughable, and you may be thinking about it right now, and it's about this so-called Salisbury attack at Pordendown, and it's the Skripal case. And Brian, you can have a take on this one as well, because yes, it might be a little bit comic even, it might be the satire of our show today, but honestly, what's your take on the situation there and what happened, and what's your biggest reaction to it?
I will just say in short, it's enough to say only this. When I heard about the Skripal's case, a source sent me the initial report, the medical report, and in this initial medical report from Salisbury, it was written that 2 patients were admitted to hospital with fentanyl poisoning. Fentanyl, this is a drug, very potent drug. But I published this information with the screenshot from this medical report. Few hours later, this report was redacted, and the word fentanyl was removed, meaning that they have what to hide. Probably the Skripals were poisoned by fentanyl, and the symptoms that the witnesses described, they match with fentanyl poisoning. this has nothing to do with Novichok or whatever nerve agent can be we can think of. And again, this is just a pretext to justify aggression against Russia.
I would agree. I mean, I think it was a totally contrived story. It's a British intelligence propaganda operation that, like Dilyana says, is basically just to drum up the fears of Russia and in the use of a supposed chemical agent. I think at the time they were trying to kind of link Russia once again with the chemical attacks that they put at the doorstep of Assad in Syria at the time, to try and add that link between the two evil dictators, that that whole propaganda line that the Western media pushes. I mean, if there's any media that's worse than U.S. media, it's got to be the British media. I mean, it's ridiculous if you read some of those papers, the headlines. It's like it's like reading the National Enquirer. It doesn't even seem like it's even approaches a genuine journalism. But I think that was if it had been a Novichok or another nerve agent, they wouldn't have survived. And then they've disappeared to an undisclosed location, and nobody has any access to them, including Russian diplomatic personnel. I mean, they are Russian citizens.
And I'm showing right now, I'm showing something. Sorry, Brian, for interrupting. I'm just going to show a headline from telegraph.co.uk, which should be a renowned website and media. And the headline is, "Half of the Russians in London are spies, claims a new report."
Yeah, what was it, like 75,000 Russian spies in
Yep.
in London alone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and that's just a typical story that would be run in a British newspaper, like the Sun or the Telegraph, or even the Guardian is just total propaganda anymore. So I just look at those headlines and I have to laugh, because they're obviously totally false.
But people believe that, Brian. They believe that. I even have friends that study and have graduated from the UK, and they believe every single word of that. They believe all the chemical attacks in Syria were by Assad. They believe that actually Lavrov and Putin had a take on this, and that they were part of that. They actually believe that that the Russian agents were behind the Novichok. They believe all of that, and it's like whatever the media there says, and whoever from their government says, it's the truth, because that's the Guardian or that's Telegraph, and they're saying right now 75,000 people, 75,000 Russians in London alone are spies. I mean, that should be coming from one of those websites that are laughing at media. Like, there are some websites like The Onion. It should be coming from The Onion.
Victor, don't get too frustrated, because I live in the States, and people here, they swallow it up too. Like, I just I can't understand how people could not look at things themselves and just do a cursory investigation themselves. Be a critical thinker. I mean, if you see something that you should immediately question the veracity of it, it would take about 2 minutes to figure it out that it's total bullshit. But what can you say? I mean, a lot of people are, they like things to come easy, and they're comfortable in their little bubble in their life, and they don't want to know the truth, if the truth is going to turn out to be an ugly truth. So, I can understand that too. But, I think between yourself and Dilyana and me, I think it's important for us as individuals that the truth be known. I mean, that's why we do what we do, is that the truth has meaning. And, we're trying to, flow up that red flag, and we're yelling at our friends and family and countrymen, hey, there's something going on there that's not okay. And, certain amount of people are going to listen, and the overwhelming majority, unfortunately, are not for whatever reason. Or maybe it's going to take a lot more to finally get them to wake up. But I think it's important that we just have to keep telling the truth.
What is not laughable though is that British media doesn't do its best to inform the British public that, for instance, there's a war in Yemen. I watched a report in which the journalist asked local British people, selected arbitrarily, and they looked well dressed, probably well educated, middle class people, or even probably higher class people, and they did not know that there was a war in Yemen. The question was, do you know what's happening in Yemen? And they asked, what's happening in Yemen? I mean, the British people asked this question. And the UK is one of the main exporters of weapons to Saudi Arabia, which have been used to kill children in Yemen. And the British public doesn't know that. And it's not the fault of the British public, it's the fault of the British media. Because being silent about the war crimes of Saudi Arabia in Yemen, they are equally complicit in these war crimes because they can prevent it. But they don't do that because it's more important to support the government instead of supporting the children in Yemen. Children in Yemen are not important, or the children in Syria are not important. What is important is Theresa May to be happy and the Saudi Crown Prince to pay for weapons. This is what matters. I'm very angry. I know that I must not be so emotional, but I saw myself what these weapons did on the ground in Syria. I witnessed how Bulgarian rocket, because I didn't see other rockets apart from Bulgarian rockets, fell next to us and beheaded a mother and her child in front of me. And when I got back in my country and I showed this to the Bulgarian people, but not a single Bulgarian journalist supported me, because the same case like in the United Kingdom, because it's more important to take money from the government under the table or in both ways, because they don't hide that take money from the government instead of saving lives. It doesn't matter. They don't care. I'm very angry, and I'm very happy that you're giving me the opportunity to share my emotions.
We're actually very happy that there's two people like you that do and conduct such investigating reports, because honestly, Dilyana, looking at the situation globally, there are very few people like you that still do that, and having a person from Bulgaria doing that, I myself feel very proud of that. And I too understand you perfectly about it. I understand you, and I was actually very upset when your initial report came out that we were selling weapons to terrorists in Syria, and that our Grad missiles were actually being fired at actually civilians. Anyway, having all of this in mind, there is a big question that I think that all of us should consider. What do you think is the possibility that the Poroshenko government, with the help of the British experts, may stage a chemical attack to provoke an escalation in eastern Ukraine, and that such concerns have already been spoken by the spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, today, and also some DPR representatives have earlier stated that. So both of you guys, Dilyana and Brian, what do you think is what are the chances, having in mind what happened in Kerch and the absolute provocation which we covered last time with Brian, what do you think is the possibility of having such provocation right now again, this time with chemical weapons in eastern Ukraine?
It is so plausible, but they even don't bother to think something new. I was in Syria in 2013 when the so-called chemical attack in Ghouta, in eastern Ghouta happened. I was there. There was no chemical attack. I mean, there was chemical attack taking place in another place, in the Al-Qaeda held territory, but not in Eastern Duma. Anyway, they even can't think a new scenario or something different. I wonder how people can still believe in this scenario, but probably they will believe. And when this staged chemical attack happen, I hope not, but who knows? Western people will say the aggressor Russia must be punished, and this regime in Donetsk must be removed, and we must send more weapons, and we must start all-out war, and nobody will win of such war. In general, nobody wins in any war, but thinking about such possibility, the only solution of the situation is that Ukrainian people must stop their crazy president. This is the only solution. I don't see other solution, because it turns out that no law international or nothing, the United Nations, the UN Security Council, nothing can stop such people to follow their agenda. It doesn't matter how many people will die.
Absolutely.
They have their agenda and they follow it.
Brian, what do you think?
Well, I would agree that I would put nothing past the Poroshenko regime or the United States government as far as another provocation. I think we're going to look down the road here and see more provocations if the past record is any indicator. Also, I think Dilyana made a point that you look at the chemical attacks or supposed chemical attacks in Syria, which on their face, any reasoning mind would say, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And when investigators get on the ground and actually collect evidence, it was found out that either these attacks were either perpetrated most likely by the rebels or nothing actually happened. But, Dilyana said, they do the same thing again and again and again. They use the same scenario. And a reasoning mind would say, well, wouldn't people finally see that it's not true? But if you look at the past, it works.
Why do you change, Brian? Why do you change something that works?
That works, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you tell the big lie and you tell it again and again and again and again. It's, use the same scenario, repetition, and people believe it. I can't explain why, the human psychology works that way, and but it apparently does. So, I think Dilyana made an important point there. We'll have to see. There's going to be another provocation. I don't know if it's going to be a chemical attack or it'll be something else, but I can pretty much guarantee you we'll see another provocation here in the future.
By the way, just want to add this up. In my opinion, and that's my personal opinion, having to say that is that nothing that's been going on in Ukraine, especially on the government level, is being decided by the government itself, especially when it comes to foreign policy, especially when it comes to military decisions. So it's not about just controlling the crazy president. I don't believe that the crazy president decides anything in Ukraine. And you, Brian, and you, Dilyana, you very well know how the Maidan was conducted, what kind of people were given power, and that people like Joe Biden were just going in Ukraine and they were sitting on the chair that was representing the leader of Ukraine, and that was very symbolic. And you know that people like Joe Biden's son were getting gas deals, they were getting corporations there, they were getting all of that. So I think that all of this is being staged by the US and its partners, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a chemical attack or alleged chemical attack somewhere near the Donetsk or Lugansk People's Republics, and the situation is going to become even more tense and tense.
There will be another war. I mean, it's it's really shocking is that can you imagine how many people are going to die?
Who cares? That's the thing, Dilyana. For the 10 or even 15th time today, we're discussing that these people that are on top of the systems, they don't care about people's lives, and you are showing that all the time with all of your reports, whether the first ones that came out from Syria or the ones that came from Georgia and Ukraine. They are just stating that these people, they don't give one damn about the people's lives. They care about destroying the enemy. They care about getting more commissions. They care about the money that's getting into their pockets and what's their influence on the world. And we have been discussing that with Brian, especially on the money aspect, the monetary aspect. That basically more than half of all of these are being conducted only to get money out of the defense budget.
Well, I mean, that's what it all boils down to in the end is money. You know, we were talking to Dilyana about the U.S. military officer that was working at the laboratory in Georgia. You know, he's traveling in a car with diplomatic plates, and he's working with the Department of State at the embassy, and he's probably working with private contractors at the laboratory that work in the biodefense industry. And then maybe in another 10 years, if he plays his cards right, he'll be a commentator on CNN. It's this revolving door, this complex, this establishment where the military, the state, the defense contractors, the media, it's all like all the lines are blending together, and it's all about profit. You know, when I write some of my analysis or my opinion articles on what's going on in Yemen and Syria, I make a point of putting in images and photos of disturbing the broken, bloodied bodies of children, because that's what it boils down to in the end. If you look at Yemen and Syria, the people that are dying over there, the civilians overwhelmingly, the children that are dying in horrible ways. I mean, I feel compelled that I have to show those images, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's what it boils down to, is that's the end result, is we're ending lives violently, innocent lives, and it happens every single day.
And in the end, people in the United Kingdom don't know what's happening in Yemen. Can you imagine? They don't know this.
But they don't know anything. Come on. I mean, you know how they're being treated by their media. They probably don't know what's going on in Syria, and you want them to know what's going on in Yemen.
You're right. By the way, yes, I wonder if they know anything about Syria. I mean, probably they know there's a war, but just this, and it's shameful. I mean, it's shameful because journalists, it's all their fault. Journalists didn't do their job in Syria well. They lied about Syria. They keep silent about Yemen. Now, I read somewhere that a team of international journalists from BBC, CNN, Reuters, and all international media came to Mariupol in Ukraine all at the same time, meaning that something is going to happen. They were all sent, their correspondents were sent to Mariupol to wait to film something. And this is not a coincidence. The same happened to when I was in Syria. The same group of journalists, they came together and they spread fake news that there was chemical attack, and they interview white helmet members while these white helmet members were Al-Qaeda terrorists. And the same will happen in Ukraine. It's very sad that nobody pays attention. I mean, people here pay attention, but people in the West don't know even that children are dying in Yemen because they don't have food, and they don't have food because So Saudi Arabia and the coalition held by the United States and the UK blocked the country, and now this country, this part of the country, is under blockade, and no foods, medicine, and anything can enter this zone, and all these children are like in a live open prison, and media doesn't do anything. They just spread news about Russia. I'm really fed up of that. I mean, it's not interesting anymore. Probably it was interesting. It was laughable, as Victor said. It was very funny to follow the Skripal story. It was like the next episode of a movie, but it's not funny anymore, because now what we are witnessing is a possible war, and it's very close to us. I mean, Bulgaria, Georgia, Eastern Europe, but it's so far away from the United States, and they don't care. It's very far away from the UK also. That's why their people don't know about this war, because these wars are here. The refugees came here. They weren't allowed to go to the United States or Saudi Arabia or other organizers of all these wars. They went to Eastern Europe, Germany, other places, but not in the main suppliers of weapons. This is a very sad reality, talking about wars. This is something that must stop.
Dilyana, I would respond that those people you're talking about, they're not real journalists. I mean, they're not engaged in the business of informing anymore. They're engaged in the business of engineering consent from their population, and they're basically going to push a narrative where, what you're doing is journalism, and I would add that it's come at great personal and professional cost to you. But you're engaging in real journalism, where these mainstream outlets, it's all about engineering consent and pushing a narrative. So in many ways, their populations do not know the truth, and they're not informed, and that's the sad reality.
Luckily, there's social media. No matter that, sometimes we are censored.
A lot of times we're censored, and I just hope that, because last time we had an interview with you on a live stream, we got censored right after that. So
really?
I am crossing my fingers right now that won't be my last live stream with Southfront.
Yeah, I don't think that was a coincidence. It happened like within 24 hours.
It was something like that. It was something like that. So they were like, they just blocked our live streams. That was it. It was nothing else, just the live streams.
And if they do it again, when our period in the corner, sitting in the corner is the bad person that violated the rules and pushed a story that is not accepted by the establishment, and we get our YouTube live stream capability back, we will have you on again.
Absolutely. By the way, because it's almost an hour and 15 minutes since we started the live program, and I think that it's about time to conclude it, and just want to say a few words before closing and giving you the podium to say your last words before ending the stream. Just want to say that we will be continuing our live stream efforts if they allow us, just crossing my fingers, and that you can actually subscribe to enable notifications on Southfront YouTube channel, because that some people, you are missing the notifications and you are missing our new videos because of this, but you can go and you can get notifications from our channel you're just one click away from that. And continue supporting our project. We're a crowdfunded project. Every donation goes to video production and keeping our servers and keeping our work going. Almost all of us are complete volunteers, and that's why this project is so amazing, and that's why we're continuing to show the truth, show different opinions, and that's why we have people like Dilyana on our program. And Dilyana, what do you wanna say to our audience to conclude this program?
Let's be positive, and no matter that we've been talking about wars, war criminals, and all that bad stuff for about an hour and a half, let's try to be positive, because in the end, what happens after my investigation? Well, I couldn't convince mainstream media that this was true, but I could press some of the actors who lied to me on camera to move to another military base. So now the Luga Center is free from military scientists, and this laboratory has been closed. There was sense of me being there and spending months on end to complete this story, because in the end this laboratory has been closed, and I will not rest until all the other laboratories around the world are also closed. It's up to the people in these countries to press their governments to close the laboratories. Something that happened in Georgia must happen elsewhere.
Brian, what do you think? And your closing remarks.
Well, I think it's important to stay positive. I mean, we're living in times that are pretty depressing, but we do what we do because we want them to change, and we want to see positive results. And I just would like to say that what Dilyana is doing is, it's I'm proud to be able to be on a live stream with you. I think that you're doing really important work, and in light of what you were telling us about with your flat being broken into, just adopt some operational security protocols that allow you to keep doing what you're doing and be safe. And unless we keep talking about these things, people aren't going to know. We do contact people. People watch our live streams or listen to our live streams, and they come to our sites and they follow our work. And people are slowly but surely, more and more of them, waking up to what's going on, and we just got to keep at it. So just a word of support for Dilyana. Just keep doing what you're doing. I think it's awesome. And, we'll do everything here at Southfront to work with you and offer support, when and where we can. So thank you very much for joining us today, and keep up the good work.
I want to thank both of you, and I want to thank Southfront, because Southfront is one of the very few media organizations that are independent, and I can assure your listeners that this is true, because nobody is behind you. You are on your own. I know Victor. Victor doesn't take money for what he's doing. He's volunteer. I'm also volunteer, and we are all volunteers. What we are doing is to be able, when we go to bed now, to sleep with our clear conscience. This is saying in Bulgaria. Victor can help me. But
Absolutely.
this is,
It's just to sleep well. Just don't have anything to worry about when you go to sleep.
yes, to sleep like a baby. This is how you say it. So I wish all of us now to be able to sleep like babies, because we've been doing what we must, and what will happen we don't know. But I want to be sure that as a human being, let alone journalist, like a human being, I have done whatever it takes so that in the end of the day I can say, yes, I did it. I can sleep now, because I have done something for this world, no matter how small it is. No matter that it is just, for example, one laboratory in Georgia or aircraft with weapons. I did it, and I'm very happy that Southfront is behind me and publishing my investigations. Something that Bulgarian media didn't do. Thank you, Southfront.
Dilyana, because I actually forgot to ask you something, and I would like a last question, one for just with 2 sentences. What are your future plans from now on?
Now I have started probably the most important investigation in my life.
You said the same last time we talked before you started the diplomatic viruses investigation.
This time it's something that if I can reach the end, I hope I could show a huge international scheme involving the support of many war conflicts around the world.
Let's leave it like that for now.
Yes.
I just want to wish you health, and I just want to wish you luck, because you will need that health and luck in your future investigations. And keep up the great work. We'll continue to post your content. We'll continue to support independent projects and independent journalists just like you. And just want to say a big thank you to Brian as well for joining us today, and to all of you, our audience from Southfront. I know it's been a pretty different live stream on a topic that it's very hard to digest. And it's not the most pleasant one to talk about, but it's important because from the outside it might look like a Hollywood movie, but in the end the documents actually prove that that this is true. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll keep you in touch for our next live streams. Visit our website to keep up with the updates, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. For me and all of the rest from our team at Southfront, we wish you a great evening or a great day if you're situated somewhere western from us. Okay, see you soon.